It's time to talk about positional tiers. First up, we have first and third base, and we'll talk about it on Fantasy Baseball Today Express. Welcome into FBT Express on Wednesday, January 22nd. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White, and let's jump into first base tiers. And first up, we have the first rounder, Scott, which includes one name, Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
Yeah, some of my tiers, particularly around the infield, are smaller this year. And I understand that might make them less helpful because it doesn't build in as much time to wait. But I can't help how the positions are distributed. And so many of the infield positions are distributed this way with just one or two names in a tier. Vladimir Guerrero, the only first baseman I think they could even be considered for round one. I know others who we'll mention soon have been in the past, but this year it's just Guerrero.
All right, let's get into those names. The elite tier, Bryce Harper and Freddie Freeman. These have been fantasy mainstays for the past decade, but instead of the first round, now you find them in the second round.
Yeah, pretty much. And I'll note that I'm still calling them elite. And at some positions, the elite tier is the top tier. If it's a position that doesn't have an obvious first round contender. So I still like Harper and Freeman a lot. I still think they're very good. They're just not first round contenders anymore. And in the case of Freeman specifically, I think we are seeing small but clear signs of decline. He hasn't been as much of a power hitter since joining the Dodgers, more of a 20 homer guy than a 30 homer guy. Got away with it the first 2 years because he became a base stealer all of a sudden, but that dropped off last year, and I'm not sure it's coming back.
Next up, we have the near elite tier, two names, Matt Olson and Pete Alonso, and these two feel like they have been paired together for years. We see similar skill sets, middling to lower end batting average, with big power and counting stats. Of course, with Pete Alonso, Scott, we're still waiting to find out where he's going to play in 2025.
And this seems like the tier at this position anyway with the widest range of outcomes because, of course, Olson and Alonso have been regarded as elite players in the past, and they could still get there, of course. But as we saw last year, there is another potential outcome for them that's disappointing if you overdraft them. I don't think people are overdrafting them this year, but where they're being drafted doesn't fully account for the downside either. In the case of Alonso specifically, we've seen the strikeout rate go up quite a bit the last 2 years in a way that I think makes it unlikely he's ever going to be a 270 hitter again. And, that obviously limits the upside. Still, we're now 3 tiers in and only 5 names in. So first base is quickly running out of exciting players to draft.
So let's give out some more names. The next best things tier includes Josh Naylor, Christian Walker, Cody Bellinger, Spencer Steer, Vinny Pasquantino, and Tristan Casas. This is where we start to get into the middle rounds. All of these names going between rounds 8 and 10, and some big offseason moves for this group as well. Josh Naylor traded to the D-backs, Christian Walker to the Astros, and Cody Bellinger traded to the Yankees.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like a nice big tier. We're 5 names into the position, and then we get this group of 7 names, but you got Salvador Perez probably drafted as a catcher, Cody Bellinger and Spencer Steer may be drafted as outfielders. So that leaves 4 true first basemen in this tier, and that can get a little scary. So I think obviously there are some names here that I feel pretty confident in, like Christian Walker has a developed track record. He's getting kind of older, so you wonder maybe if some regression could be in store. I like that upside of Vinny Pasquantino and Tristan Casas, but they're not totally proven. So just less certainty within this range, but it is kind of the last tier at first base where I can get excited about who I'm drafting as my starter.
All right, let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll talk about third base tiers right after this. Welcome back in FBT Express, and let's dive into third base tiers. The first rounders, just one. Jose Ramirez, who's coming off a near 40-40-40 season, 39 home runs, 41 steals, 39 doubles. The only question here, Scott, is how early to draft Jose Ramirez?
Round one. He's my 5th overall pick in both Roto and head-to-head. I have the same top 5 for both formats, slightly different order, but Ramirez comes out 5th in both. He equaled his career high in home runs last year, set a career high for stolen bases. Not surprising to set a career high for steals, given the new stolen base environment in the league. But, he doesn't have to quite live up to the 39 home runs again to justify the 5th overall pick, because it is such a wide array of skills.
The also elite tier includes Rafael Devers, Austin Riley, Jazz Chisholm, and Manny Machado, fantasy mainstays in the sport, but they do come with some questions. Devers had injuries to both of his shoulders last season. Austin Riley ended his season on the IL with a hamate injury, and Jazz Chisholm does have a very extensive injury history, Scott. So how much do you worry about injuries with this also elite tier?
Well, Chisholm, it was a UCL issue in his elbow, right? Which is that's what's operated on when Tommy John surgery happens. Doesn't sound like that's going to happen for him, obviously, but it's in the back of your mind when you draft him. Still, he was productive after the injury. His numbers were awesome with the Yankees, and you just pace those out over a full season, and he's being underestimated here in the also elite tier. But with these guys, certainly Devers and Riley have a history of being high-end players and performing like it. And I think their injuries happened. I think by the time spring training starts, their injuries are going to be a distant memory, and we shouldn't downgrade them too much because of it.
The near elite tier at third base includes one name, Alex Bregman. And he's actually one tier lower in a categories league. So he's really only in this tier for points leagues, where that's the specialty for Bregman. He has great plate discipline. Like Pete Alonso, also a free agent, so we're still waiting to find out where Bregman is going to play this upcoming season.
Yeah, so it's a completely vacant tier for Roto leagues, for categories leagues. Just in points leagues do I like Bregman ahead of the next group.
Let's talk about that group. The next best things includes Jordan Westberg, Matt Chapman, Royce Lewis, Mark Vientos, Junior Caminero.
Caminero!
Alec Boehm, and Isaac Paredes. A very interesting tier, Scott, that includes established veterans as well as young upsidey types entering 2025.
Yeah, it seemed like in the full-length podcast, this was the tier between these two corner infield positions where there was the most disagreement between Chris and me. And I can understand why. I'm down relative to the consensus on Mark Vientos. I'm up relative to the consensus on Matt Chapman. So it might make some people's heads spin to see them in the same tier like this, but part of it's just my own personal feelings about those players. You got Junior Caminero with a ton of upside, Royce Lewis too, but they still have much to prove. Lewis, for the extended stretch he was healthy last year, very underwhelming for all the fireworks from earlier in his career. And then you got Isaac Paredes, who is being drafted much later than the rest of this group on average. But I think that is a mistake, because I think Paredes, with his move to Houston, getting back to an environment that plays into his batted ball profile of just living around that left field foul pole and piling up home runs that way. I mean, the best environment he's going to for that profile. I think he could end up performing something like Alex Bregman in Houston. And if so, this is where he needs to be tiered.
All right. If you do want to hear more about the first and third base tiers, you can listen to our full-length podcast, Fantasy Baseball Today, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today Express, and we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.